So what color of the rainbow do you think is one of the hardest colors to get from nature? If you guessed green, you are right. Hi, this is Margaret Byrd and welcome to Color Quest. Green, you would think that would be pretty easy as a color option in the natural dyer's word, but in fact, it is quite difficult. And if you've been with me for a long time, you know that I am always in search of it and rarely finding it. Well, as we are moving through the rainbow, revisiting ways in which to make different colors on the spectrum, today we're going to be looking at green, and we're going to be doing it with a little help from our yellow friend, Weld. What are we going to use to try to coax some green into our dye pot? That would be logwood. Interesting choice. Let's go see if we can make green. So before we start the process of asking logwood to help us find green, I thought it would be good for us to take a quick review of some of the other ways in which I have looked for green over the course of several years here at Color Quest. In the very beginning, I was looking at dye sources that came from my kitchen, and so I looked to some green vegetables to bring about very light greens like spinach, artichoke, and asparagus. I guess you could call it green, but it was so light and almost living in the yellow realm. It's a little hard to consider those to be what you might think of as true green. I had read that Rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susan flower, could bring about green. I ended up separating all of the bits of that particular flower, and I did get some green from the leaves and stems. I did the same with lilac and got a faint greenish color that came from those leaves. We can also shift color sometimes with pH shifts of acid and alkaline for colors that are sensitive to those. And we were able to invite some greens from foxglove, foraged from my forest here, as well as from red hibiscus that I took from the garden of my studio in Mexico. Two very different greens came from those pH shifts. And if you go way back in the video library, you will see that I also did an alkaline shift with red cabbage, and although that often will bring blue, I got green. So it's possible, you just never know. Now, I was promised green from some of my dye friends in the UK that the variety of nettle that they have brings about a delicious mint green, and yet I wasn't able to find that from the nettles that I foraged here in the Pacific Northwest. It eluded me time and time again. Go back and check out that video. And I was gifted some stevia from a viewer here in the Color Quest family, and we did get some very light hints of green when using that in the dye pot. We did have two flowers from the Color Farm that gave us a sort of steely green, gray-green, maybe slightly bluish in its tint, and that was with the black hollyhock as well as the black knight scabiosa or pincushion. Those greens were very subtle, had a gray to them, but they were lovely, and that came simply from using the flowers themselves. But probably my favorite greenish hue that I have been lucky enough to find in my dye studio has come from Japanese indigo. The fresh leaf indigo does bring about some bluish green colors, and depending upon how you use it, green can be the forward color. And certainly when you pound the fresh leaf indigo, there is a combination of blue and green in that process. And of course, pounding leaves in general, you may welcome green. On that, I looked at things like herbs. And although I was able to get green, it was with the help of iron. And iron can be a way to welcome green from things that are yellow. And one that surprised me, but turned into a lovely khaki green, was shifting acorn dyed fiber, also with iron. So trust me, we're going to be looking at iron as well, but not today. Today we're going to look at an over dye process using a little bit of color theory, but instead of using blue to create green with yellow, I'd like to look at logwood. Logwood is a wood chip that is used in natural dyeing, typically to bring about purple, but I'm hoping that if we play around a little bit with the percentages, it might do a lovely job of creating just enough of a cold color over the top of yellow to invite a new shade of green. So a few videos ago, we looked at the vibrancy of yellow coming from Weld. It is a flower that I hadn't yet used here at Color Quest, and I thought it would be a wonderful way to look at that as we move back through the rainbow and as a base for overdyeing. Overdyeing can be a wonderful way to create new colors. You can do mixing within your pot itself of different colors, but as an overdye process, you do have some control in deciding when to remove your fiber as you see that secondary color emerging. We saw that last week when we looked at Weld as the base color and then overdyed with madder, it made a big difference how long we kept that fiber in the madder itself and got two wonderful shades. So you can use visual cues to see as that secondary color starts to change the undercolor and pull it out if you decide that you like the color that is emerging. So we already have our Weld dyed pieces of fiber ready to go. They have been washed and mordanted. I did have someone ask the question of whether or not you should mordant a second time before you do your overdye. That is purely up to you. I typically don't do that. However, if you choose to do that, fantastic. You're just going to be adding more of that wonderful binding power. Today, however, I'm not going to be doing a secondary mordant. We will take the Weld fiber and simply put it into a logwood dye pot. But we gotta get the logwood ready, so let's work on that. So here is that beautiful Weld dyed fiber. I have wool, silk, and cotton. And it came from Botanical Colors. I bought it dried and use it at 100%. Really yummy color. Now the logwood, which I also bought at Botanical Colors, I can use this at different percentages. I'm going to use it at a low percentage today, at just 10%. I have a video here where we looked at low percentages versus high percentages up to 100%. Go back and check that out. You can see it really makes a difference in the color. My hope is that with the low percentage, I'm not going to overwhelm the Weld with purple, but give it that cool color tone that maybe is going to bring us a nice green. So let's get our logwood weighed at 10% of the weight of fiber. So I need to soak my fiber in water before I'm going to put it into a dye pot, and I also need to soak my logwood chips. Because it is wood, it's going to need a little bit of time in water to begin coaxing out that color. So let's weigh our fiber first dry. That will help us determine how much of our logwood we're going to need, and then we'll get those chips into water soaking next to the fiber that we will be soaking. We'll do this for about an hour, and then we can start the extraction process. All right, I have 5 grams of fiber. It's not a lot. If I were to do 10%, I would need to do a half of a gram. My scale does not measure to half numbers, so therefore I think I'm gonna go ahead and up it to 20%. In other words, I'm going to weigh 1 gram of logwood. All right, those are soaking. I'll let that happen for about an hour, and then I can start the extraction process from the logwood chips themselves. It's a very small amount. I don't have a lot of fiber. If I keep these on the stove for about 30 to 45 minutes and I'm not satisfied with the amount of color that's been extracted, I can start with a fresh pot of water and extract them a second or third time. These are exhaust extractions, and with logwood, it's a fantastic way to get as much of the pigment out as possible. If I do it that way, I will keep the volume of water quite low to make it as concentrated as possible. Let's see how the first soak goes after we have a chance to heat it up for about 30 or 45 minutes. If I'm satisfied that it's a purplish enough color, I will just simply add the weld dyed fiber to it. If I decide I want to add a little bit more purple, I can just take those chips and do an exhaust extraction. Experimentation, that's what goes on here at Color Quest. I heated it for an hour, and then actually I just let it soak overnight. It's got a really nice color. So I think I'll just strain it and put it on the stove with the weld. So I put the fiber in, and then I wasn't paying attention. It was in for probably 45 minutes, and I remembered by the time I pulled it out, it was quite dark. Let me show you. So I've already rinsed these, and it is a dark green, and it was not very consistent. It definitely, I wasn't paying attention, and you can see that it's a little bit patchy. I like how it looks though, but I think what I want to do actually is put in another group of weld dyed fiber like I did with the madder root, and pay attention. I'm going to put the timer on for 15 minutes and check it and see if I can find a slightly lighter green just purely by leaving it in the logwood for a short amount of time. Let's get that weld fiber wet and we will test it out. Okay, my 15-minute buzzer is about to go off. I am just going to pull it out. I can see that it's changed slightly. Let's pull it out, rinse it, dry it, see if I like it, if it's enough of a green. Otherwise, I can put it right back in. So let's do that. So it looks a lot more yellow in this camera than it does in real life. It really does look green to me. So let's see if I can translate this. Rinse it, dry it, and maybe it'll show up. Okay, I've let this dry, and the cotton, it's definitely green, but it's got a lot of yellow shining through. The silk as well. There's a difference. I think this looks really nice. This definitely has a difference. So you can see the yellow and then the green. It's very light though. So I think I'm going to go ahead and at least put the cotton and the silk back in for another 15 minutes. I'll have to think about this one. I do like that green. And yeah, maybe give it a little bit more time. All right, well that was fun. We have some very distinct greens. Let me show you the final result. Okay, so you can see the weld pieces there, and you can see that first soak that I did where I sort of forgot about it, let it stay in too long. This one, here's the silk and the wool. This color is absolutely gorgeous. I love that color. Beautiful forest green. And these, which look a little gray again in the video, they of course did not color uniform, but it is a colder green. So definitely the purple of the logwood came through. And then this is the color that I had. This piece and this piece, the silk and the cotton, stayed in for just 15 minutes. I pulled those out along with this piece, which is like a really vibrant neon green, at least to my eyes. And then I decided to put these two back in. So these two pieces, the silk and the cotton, got a second 15 minutes. So 30 minutes for those, but I did not put the wool back in. I kept the wool out. So you can see those three colors. So again, just really expanding that palette, and yeah, this is fun. So how about that? This just goes to show you that there can be quite a difference depending upon how long you decide to leave your fiber in. So very much like the madder root over dyed onto the welds that we looked at last week, this had the same sort of impact. When I left the weld in the logwood for an hour plus, it got really dark. That green though is beautiful. It's like a forest green. And by leaving it in just between 15 and 30 minutes, I got more of a chartreuse, certainly with the wool, and then a really pretty lighter green, sort of a lemony green, if that's a color. Lime green, maybe lime green is better for that shorter period of time. Now I've got two more greens to add to my natural dyes palette. So next week on Color Quest, let's continue looking at green, but this time let's look to do a shift of color with what I'm calling an over dye, but it's actually an over modifier, meaning I'm going to use the power of an iron bath as a post dip on weld to see if we might be able to invite green to our palette that way. Have a wonderful week. If you have any questions or comments, remember, put it down there in that comment section, because I answer all the questions that come through, and I absolutely love interacting with the larger community of Color Quest. And I will see you next Friday. Choose to add, am I gonna do that? Am I gonna do that? My nose is itchy.